Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to Triggered Precision Machine. A couple weeks ago I put out a video on positional rifle shooting. We went over all four basic positions just very quickly. So starting at the bottom, we went over prone, then we moved up to seated, then we went to kneeling, and then we finished up with the standing position. It got kind of put on hold, but my plan was to go over each of those positions in depth and kind of do a demonstration / analysis of each position and what they're good for, some of the drawbacks and some of the advantages. So we did that with prone position. That was a few days after the initial video, and we spent about 25 minutes going over that position and kind of dialed that in really well. And then we had some bad weather. So finally we have some decent weather here, and I'm back out at the range today, and we're gonna move on with this series. And today we're going to go over the seated position. Here we go. All right guys, here we are on this nice snowy, slushy surface. And today we have the Voodoo V22 for this demonstration. I picked this rifle on purpose because it's close to a 20-pound rifle and it's in a chassis that is not exactly set up optimally for positional rifle shooting. So the point is just to show that this can be used with a variety of rifles, a variety of rifle weights, a variety of stocks or chassis, and just a whole entire range of things that you might experience out there, whether you're hunting, shooting competitions, or just recreational shooting. So what we're going to do is we're going to move through a bunch of the different variants of this position, and I'll shoot 5 rounds from each one, and then at the end we'll evaluate what we have. Downrange, I have a target backer that's about 18-20 inches wide and 3 feet tall with a single 8-inch shoot and see target stapled in the middle of it. So we'll be able to account for all of our rounds hopefully, and we'll see what works and what doesn't work. And at the very end, we'll kind of wrap up with talking about what applications this position does have. All right, before we start sending rounds downrange, a couple things I want to go over that help to make this position a little bit easier to shoot. And this kind of goes for all the different positions for what we covered. So first off, if you're running a magnified optic, like this is a 3 to 18 power, you want to have your magnification dialed back. So I typically won't shoot anything over 10 power for any of these positions. I'm at 50 yards, so right now I'm probably going to start at maybe 8 power and see how that looks and see how my wobble zone looks, and I'll probably dial it back to 6 power if it is a little bit too wobbly. So I say that because the magnification, it doesn't just serve to bring your field of view closer to the target, but it also magnifies any sort of movement that you have. So you'll notice if you shoot a iron sighted rifle, it almost appears that you're rock steady on the target. There is some wobble built into that, but you can't see it because it isn't magnified. When you dial the power all the way up, so for instance, if you were shooting this on a 25 power scope, you would have a lot of apparent wobble as you're trying to center your crosshairs on the target to break a shot. So dial the power back, and that will save you a lot of heartache. And the last thing I want to cover is natural point of aim. We talked about this a lot in the first video, a little bit in the prone video, and we'll talk about it again just to give you guys a refresher, because you're actually going to see me putting this in action here when I build this position up. So what we want to do is we build our initial position up, settle into it, relax our body while still maintaining a good sight picture. Then we're going to close our eyes for a second, open them back up, and see if there's any lateral shift or any vertical shift in where our crosshairs are lined up, and then we'll adjust our body position from there. So if after we do that for the next time, our crosshairs are going to be right where we want them, and we're not going to be fighting our body and where our body wants us to go. So let's get to shooting. All right, for the first variant of the seating position, I'm going to be seated with my legs crossed, and if you were to draw a line across the front here, it's roughly perpendicular to my line of sight to the target. So my body's nice and squared up, which is going to let me absorb the recoil and manage the recoil good for follow-up shots. And it's going to make it easier when I'm trying to build that nice, solid, natural point of aim. So we'll build the position up here and take a couple shots. All right, so we'll keep it to 5 shots, but so I'll be honest, this rifle's pretty heavy. It's not exactly easy to shoot this position or this specific variant of the seated position with this rifle, but I made it work and I kept them all within that 8-inch circle. So with you account for the wind and the nice cold surface I'm sitting on, I think that's fairly decent for today's conditions. So behind me, I have a bunch of these positional shooting bags, and we're gonna play around with a couple of these. And these are all very, very common in the PRS and the NRL matches, and they serve to take up space and create more body contact and more stability when you're building these different positions. So we'll start out with this larger bag right here. This one's very, very handy, but we'll see how we use it here. Try it up front. All right, so I'll tell you right now, that's much more stable. So the problem I was having on that first round is my elbow is a little bit too low, and I was having problems getting the nice vertical elevation that I needed. So we'll give a shot with this position and the bag in there and see how that improves things. All right, so that was much better. Now let's build on this position that we have here, and we'll add another pad back here for the rear elbow. Yeah, that's much, much nicer. All right, so that was much easier. I was able to keep all of those shots in about a 3 to 4 inch circle down range. And you'll notice that I was not taking a whole lot of time in between breaking my shots. It might have seemed like I was rushing things. And I wasn't necessarily rushing things, but first off, I had an acceptable wobble on target. So that means that my wobble is kind of going consistent, and it's something that I can manage and break a shot with. And next thing, I didn't want to fatigue out with this rifle. Again, even this 20-pound heavy rifle in these bags will make you tired holding it up like that for a few seconds or 30 seconds or whatever it may be. But you want to make sure that you break your shots before you get fatigued, or just break one shot, rest, break another shot, rest, and so on and so forth. But that is much, much easier to shoot with these bags here, much more stable than it is with just elbows on soft tissue down in your legs. And that brings up another great point. So when we're building these positions up, if we're not using the bags, we want to make sure that we have bone on meat instead of bone on bone. So you have nice meaty spots down here on your thigh and the insides of your kneecaps, and that's a great spot to position your elbow. It can kind of dig in there, and you'll have better stability that way, as opposed to bone on bone where things are slipping and sliding every which way. So let's try another variant of the seated position, and we'll see how that goes. All right, guys, so here is another variant. This one's pretty popular, and it's easier for me to shoot in, to be honest. And what you want to do is just basically find a spot for the inside of your elbow right here to kind of rest around the edges of your kneecap. That's going to give you the best stability. And then I like to rest the mag on the crook of my elbow right there, and that gives me a pretty good amount of elevation to hit my target. So let's send 5 rounds downrange, and we'll see how this goes. All right, so that's very, very stable. That's even better than the first position with both bags in place. So I was able to keep all those in probably close to a 2-inch circle right around the edge of the bowl. But let's try to make that position even better now using some of these support bags. All right, guys, so here's a position I just came up with. I've never tried this one before, so I have the larger positional bag down here in front of my, on the bottom of my left leg. And what that does is it's giving me a really nice support up higher and steady so I can build my elevation in. In the back, I have this one here as a rear support, and that just kind of takes up a little space and lets me have a real nice steady support in the back. So let's give it 5 shots. It's pretty steady. Rushed that one and threw it just low of my 8-inch target down there. But that's a pretty darn stable position, not too bad. This is something you could also use a ruck or some backpack in the field if you were hunting, didn't have these positional bags. That serves as a really nice solid foundation for building this seated position. So let's play around with some other variations of this. All right, guys, so here's another one. We're filling gaps, we're taking up voids and giving our body more contact, so that gives us more stability. So I filled up this void right here with this big bag, and that feels real nice. And I have the little one back here under my armpit, and that fills up that void very nicely. So let's give it 5 rounds. All right, so shooting fast, and that's because it was a pretty stable position and it had a very, very small wobble zone, basically going back and forth about 2 inches on either side of the center of the target. So I was able to break those shots very fast, but that's a very, very stable way to shoot. All right, guys, so that's all the shooting we're gonna do today. Now let's just talk about some of the applications for the seated position in competition, hunting, and recreational shooting. So there is a lot of emphasis on the seated position and the kneeling position in PRS and NRL matches. There's a lot of stages that you have to sit in back of a barricade where you're going to rest the front of your rifle on to get low enough in order to break your shot. So having the knowledge and the comfort level to shoot the position accurately and effectively is huge. And you've got to get a little creative. So if there's a barricade right here and I have my rifle up on the barricade like this, figure out ways that you can fill in gaps between your body parts and the rifle. So for instance, if my barricade was right here in front of me, about my shoulder level high, you can rest the rifle there and build ourselves a nice solid position here in the back. Most of these courses of fire in the NRL and PRS matches, they don't have equipment restrictions, but you generally do have to have all of your gear on your body before you hit the timer to start. So a lot of these things have nice things built into them that allow you to carry them with you. So you have free hands to hold your rifle, an additional bag, and whatever you need to shoot that stage as accurately as you can. So now for hunting. This is also a great shooting position for hunting. It's not necessarily a hasty and fast shooting position. It takes a couple seconds to get set up, but it is far more stable than shooting from the standing position. So if you have an extra 2 or 3 seconds to drop down, build this position up, which only takes you a couple seconds because you've been training like this for all of the preseason. Build your position up, get a nice steady sight wobble, and break your shot right where it needs to go. So, hunting, competition, then recreational shooting. At the very end of this, we're going to go through what I call a 4-position qualification. So there's going to be 5 shots from each of the 4 positions. So prone, seated, kneeling, standing, and we're going to shoot it a couple different ways. We're going to shoot it without any accessories or bags or anything to add stability. It's going to be muscle on bone, and that's how we're going to shoot that one. And then we're going to build it up to where we're shooting with the positional support bags like you would in a NRL or PRS match. And then we're also going to shoot it with a ruck or a backpack like we would out in the field when we were hunting. And we'll go over all the different ways we can use these tools to make ourselves more stable and more effective in these positions. So a couple things to take away from this video. First off, as we move up from the ground, we lose stability. So our prone position is going to be the most stable there is. Then we move up to the seated, and that's the second most stable in my opinion that there is. And then we have kneeling, and that's a little bit less stable. It's still pretty good. Then we have standing, and that's where things generally go south with all of us, and it's very difficult to shoot rifles, especially like this, accurately from the standing position. But it's something we need to practice still. So another thing to reiterate is this is not just a competition skill. This is not just something that you're going to see on TV at the Olympics or something like that. This is a hunting skill. This is everything. Anyone who wants to be proficient at shooting a rifle, these skills are excellent to have to make you a more well-rounded shooter. So just shooting from a bench all the time, if that's your thing and that's all you're ever going to do, then that's fine. But if you're actually going to get out and go hunting in different areas, you're going to dip your toes into the competition world, then having these under your belt and understanding how to build them efficiently and quickly is going to help you a lot in the long run. Alright guys, here's where we check our damage. So I think we had 20 rounds on target, and there's that one that I called. I didn't notice that other one right next to it, but I have 2 off target, so 18 out of 20. And it's not the best, not the worst, but that's acceptable in my opinion for hunting accuracy and even competition accuracy. You're shooting pretty large targets in most cases. And I think that with a different setup Alright guys, here's where we check our damage on target. There's the one that I called right there. I saw that one in the scope and I broke that shot way too early. I didn't see that one through the scope, and I'm not sure which shot that would be, but you can see they're all pretty much within about a 4-inch circle or so. I have a couple outliers here and there, but for the most part, they're right there. And a lot of this side to side is due to the wind. We have some winds that are going from, let's say, 5 to 10 miles an hour out here pretty consistently. So that is blowing the little 22 round off target, but that also could be me. So either way, pretty decent shooting from that position. And we kind of see how that plays out when we use the different bags and stuff. But I mentioned I was able to keep some of those groups right around a 2-inch diameter circle, and that's these right here. And I was very stable from that second variant of the seated position that we shot. So that wraps it up for today, guys.